So we're going to switch gears now from operating to a new piece of gear that's coming available to us, some more technology for us to take advantage of. And in parallel with this continually evolving product, we're learning how we want to use it and what features we might want to have to solve different problems. And I've personally been involved on that on the usage side as a user. And we have the designer of the product here. And after this session, you can go over to the DX Engineering booth and have more discussion about the product than what we're going to get into today. So this is really going to just be a snapshot from both the application side and from the product itself and how these things might work together. So the product is RigSelect PRO, and I'm going to start off by setting up some background for why you might want to think about this particular product. And so this is going to be kind of a tandem presentation between myself, or with myself and Courtney. So a little bit about SO4R, and I realize that not everyone in the room is doing SO4R or is interested in that, but one of the things, and especially in digital contesting and RTTY in particular, is that once you learn that your station's working really smoothly, there's a lot of dead time as you're waiting for things to do, because you're not copying CW in your head or even listening to sideband. You're just hitting keys that are sending messages, and the computer's really doing a lot of the work. So you got a lot of brain power, and people are finding themselves watching TV, doing email, reading a book, watching a sports game while they're contesting in RTTY. And so that's when you can think about doing another radio. When your one radio is transmitting, you can be listening on another and vice versa. And that's the whole idea around SO4R, as Tim has told us to get the rate up. So there's kind of two architectures that I think about for being able to do multiple radio contesting. And the first one is where you have a single PC, but you have two, or you could have more radios. And then there's a controller in the middle that switches your input and output devices, your UIs, between the two radios at the appropriate time. And your software on the PC knows from where you are which radio that you want to operate on to do the switching. So that's kind of the typical SO4R controller. Almost everyone on the market is using this kind of a configuration. And so the focus is, in other words, which radio the PC has steered the controller to is determined by what the operator does on that PC. So usually there's a keyboard command, maybe the up and down arrows on the keyboard, that allow you to get from radio 1 to radio 2 and back and forth. One of the things that means is that now part of your brain cells are doing this little subroutine, keeping track of where you are, because if you think you're on radio 2, but you're actually, the hardware has you on radio 1, you're going to have a real mess, because you're going to be talking to on the wrong band, for example. At least logically, it's not going to be a problem, except it's not going to make sense to the person on the other end. So one of the things is that your CAT control, your control of the two radios, is now from one PC, and so that the software and the logger in that PC has to have two COM ports and is talking to each of the two radios separately. And in your software, you can now move some of the user interface, like the keyer, or either the voice keyer or the CW keyer, push-to-talk control, FSK, into, from the software, can now be steered through the controller to either of the two radios. A second way of doing SO4R is to actually have a PC on each radio. But now the problem is the PCs are not connected together, and so each PC doesn't know what's going on in the radio. The plus side of this is that now the focus for the operator is physical. So instead of having to remember in your brain what state your system is in, it's very physical. You just turn to the keyboard on one side or the keyboard on the other side. Your eyes move between the displays. You physically put them close together, as you can see in this next slide. This is actually an SO4R setup, And you can see there in the middle, there's two radios and screens and keyboards and mice and knob controls that are very tightly pressed together. On the right is another third station. So all of these are, it's like a multi-op with 3 complete stations. You could sit down 3 people if you could physically get them in this space that I'm showing there, and just operate as a multi-op. But instead, the single op is physically time sharing between all of those things. And in RTTY, that works pretty slick because, again, you don't have to touch type much in RTTY. You're just pressing keys. They're basically just function keys running macros. So you can have one hand on one keyboard, another hand on another keyboard, and be able to operate through this. So one of the issues, say, between this setup, and I guess I should say maybe a little bit more about the application. So during the day, you might have the 2 main radios on, say, 10 and 15 meters, and the third radio on 20 meters. And watching 20 meters for, multipliers or new stations that you haven't worked. And when the rate slows down on one of the other radios, just quickly go over and sneak in a QSO on the other band and interleave it in, and hopefully doing it with enough finesse so you don't lose your run frequency on one of the other 2 radios. And so you can kind of just dynamically decide what you want to use. But the point is you've got the hardware, the means there to work 3 bands, even though you physically can't do it. You couldn't run on 3 bands, for example. But you've got the hardware there to do it if there's just a little bit of a lull or a gap, you're not getting an answer to a CQ, to throw in another QSO on the other band. So it's just a way to very marginally increase your rate, and that's what it takes if you're at the top of the heap trying to edge out a competitor. So the question is then, I've only got 2 hands and 2 ears and so forth, so how do I get my 2 primary radios selected out of those 3 or 4 or however many I have set up? And that's where a slightly different or an additional feature for the controller, for the SO4R controller, is needed. And that's where Courtney and his product have come into the scene. So in this diagram, I'm showing 3 radios, and what the way I set up the RigSelect PRO in February for the last WIPIX RTTY contest was I programmed 3 of the buttons, push buttons on the front panel of this controller. So if I hit the first button, I got my first 2 computers in SO4R. So all of my routing of everything, the audio and everything, was instantly on those 2 computers. If for some reason I wanted to run on radio 1 and radio 3, instead of having to do a whole bunch of switches and move things around, I hit 1 push button on the front, and all of a sudden now I have radio 1 in the left ear and radio 3 in the right ear, and all of the switching of the FSK and everything, push to talk and so forth, is going to the correct radios and so forth, so I can get any pair of those 3. So it turns out that that's a very minuscule or simple feature of what's possible with the technology. It's maybe 5% or 10% of the capability features of what this product can do. So what Courtney and I are doing, and some other beta testers, is working on bringing the technology and the features to do the sorts of things that we want to do as a user. So it's really a neat kind of engineering project, sort of beta, I guess you would say, but we're really figuring out how to have the technology support what we're trying to do, and we're doing that in parallel. Lots of times products are developed, great technology, and then the users figure out, how they can apply it, but they're restricted to whatever, the technologists, the designers did. In this case, we had a designer that's just quickly turning around the changes that we need to be able to satisfy our technology. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Courtney and have him give you just a smidgen of an overview, a taste of what this product's all about. And again, feel free to come over to the DX Engineering booth and learn more about it. So, Courtney?
Okay. Well, Ed, thank you, and good morning to all of you. Appreciate you all being here. For what it's worth, This is really the first time that this RigSelect product has been talked about outside of about a dozen beta testers across the country. So this is the product's debut. So you are here at a product launch. So I'm really pleased to be able to bring it to you. So let me see if I can make sure this works. Okay. So this is a brand new product. It's been hardware stable since about last October. We haven't made any hardware changes. We've been upgraded as kind of intimated. The software's been updated as we think of new features, new things that this hardware can do. But it's new, and we haven't been getting too many bug reports, which is always good. So this is the front panel of this box, and it's actually a very simple box. And kind of the way it started out, and kind of my original purpose for designing this was I had a bunch of radios, and I didn't want to have 3 mics and 3 different push-to-talk switches and so on and so forth. I just wanted to be able to use 1 set of headphones, 1 mic, 1 push-to-talk, and 1 key with all my different radios. And I really couldn't find anything on the market that did something like that. So I thought, hey, I can build something like that. And so this was kind of the version 1.0 was that. So it had 4 buttons and a little display that you could kind of get some status reports on. And you just push a button, it'll select radio 1 or radio 2 or radio 3, and you're set to go. The little display actually has a menu system built into it. And this is about 8 versions past my original design. So it's gone a long way in a couple of years. And I might add, it's been a really fun project to work on. But the little display, it's a color display, and it has a menu system built in to it. Despite the fact that it's pretty small and you only actually use 2 buttons to control the menu, most of the beta testers, and for a long time we didn't have an app that put a GUI around it, but beta testers actually figured out how to work this thing just with a little tiny menu system. Okay, the rear panel is a lot busier, and it's actually pretty tight. It helps to have small fingers if you're plugging stuff in and out. The jacks on here are all 3.5 millimeter stereo jacks. So it's a very standard plug. There's nothing fancy. You can buy them on Amazon, or used to be able to buy them on Radio Shack. There's really kind of 5 major groupings. If you look towards the middle there, you'll see it says common. And for example, audio out, that's where you would plug your headset in. And on the far left-hand side, there's an audio in. So this is where you would feed the audio from each of the 4 radios, or how many you have. You'd feed the audio into the jacks on there. That's an input. The rest are outputs. And so, for example, mic, you would plug your microphone into the mic in that center block, and then you would plug from the back of the RigSelect to the mic input on the different transceivers. So it's pretty obvious and straightforward as to how you hook it up. But it's pretty crowded when you get all those cables on there. Right next to the center gap, there's a 12-volt DC. So this does require 12 volts. It actually will take anything from about 6 through 15. The regulator inside is good to 30 volts, but you'll probably burn some plastic if you try and operate it at that voltage. Above it, and this is kind of one of the coolest things, I think, and it's really made this box different than some of the others that are out there. And that is that there's 2 USB Type-C connectors on there. And there's actually 3 USB ports. So when you go into your device manager in Windows, you will see three ports that this box will kick up. Probably the one you're going to want to use the most is the one that's labeled USB Run. And USB Run has 2 virtual ports. And this is what makes it really easy to hook up to a logging program. So from a logger, for example, if you're doing CW, and I'm kind of a CW guy, you want to have the CW input, and it's usually WinKey or something like that. So the logger is sending a CW. That goes into the WinKeyer port, and this box does have a genuine K1EL WinKeyer 3.1 in it. Then there's the second port on the USB Run is the OTRSP. For those who aren't familiar, that's Open 2 Radio Switching Protocol. It was developed by Paul Young, K1XM. And so both those ports And so if you go to a logging program like, say, N1MM says, what's your CW port? You just write in the number. And the next question, basically, when you're setting it up is, what's your OTRSP port? You put that number in, and away you go. The second port that's labeled USB app is, that's actually a direct line right into the Arduino processor that's in this radio. And that actually is a pretty handy thing to do. We've written an app, a Windows app, that basically takes all the little tiny menu stuff and puts it in a GUI. And in addition to that, since we had a lot more screen space and the ability to do some cool stuff, we were able to add some features that you just couldn't add, through the little tiny push button menu system. So for example, one of those features that Ed uses, I want to reprogram the buttons. Well, using a menu system with the buttons to try and reprogram the buttons would be a pretty slick trick, and I wasn't capable to pull it off. But the GUI can. So that's where the GUI comes in. Okay, let's move on to the sort of partial feature list. RigSelect has a 54-page manual, and there's about 3 pages of features, some of which are more important than others. But I thought I'd just pick out some that might be particularly interesting to a contesting crowd here. So as Ed pointed out, you can do a single operator 2 radio on any 2 of those 4 radios. And the pair is instantly selectable. And I mean, when you press that button, or for example, if you send a command in, and you can send all of these things in by a USB command coming in on that USB app, you can switch a pair instantly. And instantly will be kind of on the microsecond scale, because it's just a few lines of code, and it goes and changes a few registers, and boom, you're now using a different pair. It's got the OTRSP support. And one of the things, I don't know how many of you may be familiar with the Yankee Clipper Contest Club SO4R box that was out there for many, many years. It's not being built anymore. RigSelect is kind of a superset of the capabilities that box had. And and by the way, we sent a RigSelect to Paul Young. And I was talking to him. I sort of apologized. I said, Paul, I'm sorry I stole your ideas. He said, no, I'm glad you did. So it's all cool with him. But we have used some of his ideas, and I really appreciate the work he has done to advance the state of the art here. There's a genuine win keyer. And this is actually really nice in a design, because one of the problems that you have when you're doing CW demands really crisp timing. If you're off and your signal's a mess. But if you have a main processor that's trying to do CW and anything else, how does it put some balance between those two? So the ability as a designer to just say, processor, tell the win keyer to send this, and then I can just go forget it and focus on doing something else with that processor. I don't need to babysit the CW sending process. And so that's just a real key thing, and so you always get great CW. The separate USB ports. So no software is required on the PC. You don't have to have a PC at all. I mean, you can take this on well, you probably wouldn't want to take that much power consumption. It's actually not too much power. It's about 350 milliamps at 12 volts, I think, would be about it. But probably not mountaintop stuff. But you don't need a PC, which is cool. The front panel buttons are configurable with the RigSelect command macros. So you can chain 3 of the RigSelect commands, and I'll go into that just in a second, together in macros, and you can assign those macros to front panel buttons. There's a macro cell placed on the app as well. There's actually probably about 70 commands that are built in there, and as I add new features, I keep adding new commands to kind of implement them. So that's the number will probably keep growing. This box is really fast. The audio is all done with solid-state relay, so you're not hearing anything go click and clack. It just switches it over, which is nice. It's actually a 16 relay array. So basically, any input can be switched to tip and ring on any other one. So it's anything to anything kind of switching. For the other stuff like mic, push to talk, and the keyer, those are done by relays. It's a telecom quality relay. I think actually. Elecraft uses the same part number in their transceivers, and they're really fast. even including kind of the software, the relay spec is about, I think, max of 4 milliseconds. But I wrote down 15 milliseconds to give a little bit of chance for some processing. Also, I mean, depending on what you're doing. For example, the worst thing on the RigSelect is when the display refreshes. That's a very CPU intensive process. So if you're in the middle of and I broke it up, so it's kind of done in like 16 different blocks, and you don't see that, but from a software standpoint, it's broken up. But if it's trying to do a display update, everything else is going to kind of slow down. But that's really, usually you're doing a display update after you've done something. So your radio is in kind of a busy state because it's doing something that you just told it to do. The display updates, and it's not going to interfere with something else. Anyway, then the app is free. It basically comes with it. Something you can easily download. It makes testing and setup much easier than using the front panel menu. So I'm going to kind of go into a couple of features, and this is more of an example of things that this can do. There's a lot of greenfield potential here. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what can happen. Ed's been good, about and others about suggesting things that, hey, if it could do this, or can you do that? And hey, I'm kind of reluctant to change hardware. That gets a lot trickier, especially now that it's quote in production, and we are in production right now. We expect to have stuff shipping by early summer. So early summer being the June, early July timeframe. Cross my fingers. We're working on it. I've got a bunch of subcontractors that are doing a good job, so it makes life easy. Anyway, so what Ed was doing, as he mentioned, he just programmed the buttons so he could switch different pairs. There's actually 8 different combinations. So you got 4 buttons, and each button can either be a single tap or a double tap. And so as Ed said, he programmed the double tap button for, I think you used double tap, right? Or did you use single tap?
I use single tap.
Okay, yeah, either way. I wasn't sure what you were using. So anyway, that just allowed him to really quickly select that SO4R pair. Another way to have done that would be to have a little, something on a screen. You could just click a function key or something else too. And that actually would probably be faster than the push buttons, because that's, again, going to be a microsecond type of thing, where the push button has got to decode the push button, and it's got to figure out what the macro was, and there's a lot more code processing. All right, moving on. So I should actually call this the Ed command, but I thought the DX command was a lot cooler. Sorry, Ed. This is actually, if you look at the top, the %DX and N. That's a very typical command, and there's, like I said, about 60 or 70 commands kind of like this. And I tried to use something that made sense from a mnemonic standpoint. So DX stands for directed by transmitter, is what the DX is. And the % is just sort of a preamble, so that I definitely know that this is a command. It's not a CW or something, and I chose the % because you probably are never going to use that combination in anything else. I actually did this web search, and it doesn't come up very often if you do a web search on %. So I figured that was a pretty safe combination to use as a preamble. And then the N is 0 and 1. So %DX 0 turns that feature off. DX 1 turns it on. Now the way this thing works, which is sort of interesting, we have the push to talk, and push to talk is normally just 2 wires, and it's the push to talk and then a ground or a ring sleeve connect. The ring connect on that stereo is usually just empty. So what we did is I kind of repurposed that ring connector as a connection from that ring connector right into the hardware. And so when that line goes low, and so if you take, for example, a key out, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a key out, and I realize that on some radios, key out is not a TTL friendly signal, and so you may have to do some transforming or scaling. But anyway, when that line goes low, it literally sends a priority interrupt to the radio or to the RigSelect, and it just switches it immediately. So the RigSelect can follow TX switching among multiple radios. So if we go back to kind of Ed's drawing here, he's got 3 different PCs driving 3 different radios. And so this allows RigSelect to understand which radio is transmitting and then instantly switch to that. Now you didn't implement that because we didn't, well, it actually just occurred right as you were starting, I think. But anyway, yeah, there was no time to get it installed in testing. And, you know, yeah. Well, there's a funny story which I won't take the time to share here right now, but catch me later about how this all went down. Anyway, so this directed by transmit is actually a really good feature when you have kind of like a multi-op setup like Ed was doing. Okay, so this is kind of another command. I thought this might be useful, and it's sort of related, which is why I thought I'd include it here. It's the BX command. And BX is sort of backdoor transmit. And what this is, let's suppose you're a contester and you're using, you know, it's a sideband with a voice keyer and it's using Vox. There is no push-to-talk signal. RigSelect, it's not connected to CAT, so it doesn't know the transmit's going on. How does it know that you'd like to have some extra audio processing, maybe blank a channel that's transmitting so you can focus on what's coming in on the receive side? So this is the BX command is sort of a backdoor transmit. It again uses that same key out signal that we got and generates an internal TX active sort of flag inside the RigSelect. And then this can be used to, you know, trigger any of the audio processing options or whatever else we want to do with it. And so again, this is sort of driven by Vox or, you know, CAT controlled transmit. And I just since I had a little extra screen real estate, this is on the right-hand, lower right-hand side there is a picture of the motherboard of the unit, which has got a lot of electronics. The little black dots to the far right side there, lower, are the audio relay switches or switch array. Okay, well I think that pretty much wraps it up. I will take questions in a second. I'll just point out that this is actually the first screen. There's 3 screens on the app that I mentioned. So this is the first screen. There's a lot of stuff. It's a pretty busy app. There's actually 2 more forms, or 2 more windows, if you will, available. I won't go over what they all are. You can come up and look closer because I realize that it's kind of tiny and you can't see it anyway. So, you know, there's some flyers that I put on the chair over there. So if you would like some flyers, you help yourself. We have a website up that's got a fair amount of information. It's rigselect.com. And you can get the download. You can download the app and play with it. You don't necessarily, you can, you know. And I might add the app is kind of fun. I thought, gee, I'm going to have to write a lot of manual for this. But it turned out what I did was instead of doing the manual, I just did the tool tips. So there's really extensive tool tips in this app. So you just drag the mouse over it, and it'll be kind of self-teaching. So I didn't feel like I needed to write a whole lot of manual, because nobody reads manuals anyway. We figured that out. So anyway, you can download the app. Firmware updates are there. The manual is online, so if you can download the current manual and check it out. Take a look for yourself. So that's it for me. And again, thank you for being part of the RigSelect debut. Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, we're having a Hamvention special. No, we're still in production. I asked the DX Engineering. This is how new this product is. I asked the DX Engineering people, and they were sort of like, well, we haven't quite figured that out yet. I'm guessing that it's going to be right around $800, but that's their call. And so that's in the neighborhood of where it's probably going to shake out.